She was stunningly beautiful, and I wanted her. I craved her. I could even go further and say that I would kill for her. 5'5", 120 inches, 36x22x35, brown eyes and fiery red hair. When she was near, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She knew what she had, and she knew that every man in the building wanted her. Her name was Constance Frederick, and she worked as a secretary where I work. Under different and better circumstances, I would have attacked her immediately, but I couldn't. As much as I wanted her, I had to behave. This lady was married, and I didn't want to touch another man's woman. It wasn't a question of morality or ethics or anything like that. It was the simple fact that I could never do to another man what was done to me. It hurt, and 3 years later it still hurt. This doesn't make much sense, does it? On the one hand, I say that I am ready to kill for her, and on the other, I say that I will never marry another man's woman. I don't need to make sense. I am human, and I have flaws just like all other people. It was Wednesday evening, and according to a ritual that began long before I started working at Cambridge Enterprises, everyone stopped at Antonio's lounge after work for a drink or two. It was only on Wednesday, and although I asked once or twice, no one could tell me why it was on Wednesday and not Friday. Friday would have made more sense to me since it was the end of the week and time to wind down before the weekend. Everyone only knew that there were always Wednesdays. I sat at a table, actually 3 tables pushed together, drinking PBR and absent-mindedly peeling the label off a bottle while watching Constance and Gary from QC dance to the music on the jukebox. They weren't the only couple, but my eyes never left Constance. I never danced with her. I didn't dare. I could only imagine what would happen if I ever got close enough to hug her. As I watched Gary and Constance walk across the floor, I wished to God that I wasn't the way I was. As the pieces of the label started to pile up, I remembered what made me who I am. Like many things, it all started in high school. Since the 10th grade, I dated a lot, but I never had a regular girlfriend. After school, I worked as a salesman in a supermarket chain. My parents gave me a car for my 16th birthday with the understanding that they would take care of the plates and insurance until I turned 18, but the gas, oil, and upkeep were on me. This meant work. Work didn't have time for a permanent girlfriend. Just because I didn't have one didn't mean I didn't want one. I even knew who I wanted, but it seemed like he wasn't in the cards. Amber was a cheerleader, and although we had known each other since 6th grade and were friendly with each other, Amber ran with the jock crowd. I was also in the crowd of athletes, but as with everything, there is a hierarchy. In football, the highest level were quarterbacks and running backs. The second level were the receivers and kickers if they were good, and the bottom level were the foot soldiers who fought in the trenches. It was me, right guard. Amber ran with the top echelon. She was consistent with the starting quarterback. I doubted Amber and I would ever get together, but I think the fates decided to play games with us. It was a Friday night, and we were playing away against Weston. It was the 4th quarter, and we were down 24-21. We had the ball at their 38-yard line with 59 seconds on the clock. We needed to get to their 25 to give our striker the opportunity to tie the game and send the game into overtime. Our running game was going well, and personally, I would have stuck with it, but a pass was called. The passage was intercepted. The guy who caught the ball could have just taken a knee and ended the game, but I think he wanted to be the hero and try to throw the ball back for a touchdown. He headed towards what he thought was an open hole, and I met him there and pinned him. The ball came loose, I picked it up and carried it to the goal line. A stupid move, looking back. I could have taken a knee, called a timeout, and let the QB and running backs try again, but I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking the same shit the guy who caught the ball was thinking. I will be a hero, or some other nonsense. Anyway, I was heading towards the end zone, and as I was running it occurred to me that linemen aren't the fastest creatures, and a Weston player was coming towards me, and I could see it if he caught up to me. Good tackle on me. I won't make it to the goal line. Just as I was thinking about it, Mike Barnes, the tight end to whom the pass was intended, walked up to me, and without even thinking about it, I handed him the ball, turned, and destroyed the Weston player. Mike scored, our side of the stands went wild as I stood up, extended my hand to the Weston player, and then received one of the biggest shocks of my young life. The fans in the stands chanted, "Dawson, Dawson, Dawson." It's me, Robert Dawson. My teammates surrounded me, grabbed me, and carried me off the field. It was the highlight of my soccer career in both high school and college, and as strange as it may sound, it was what brought Amber and I together. I didn't know it, and I don't think any of my teammates knew it at the time, but on the eve of the game, Amber broke up with Brad after she caught him cuddling with Harlena Collins. On the way to school, Amber sat next to me and asked if I would go to the victory celebration, and when I said yes, she asked, "Do you want a date?" "With whom?" "A fool with me." "What about Brad?" "This is yesterday's news." "How about it, Bobby?" "Of course I'd like to be your date." In my opinion, I viewed this as a one-time deal. She no longer had a regular place and didn't want to go to a party alone, so she joined the man of the hour. Do not laugh. You know damn well you had an ego when you were a teenager. We had a good time at the party, and she cuddled up to me like I was her only one. I thought it was probably to piss Brad off, but I was surprised when I took her home and she asked what I was doing on Saturday. "I work on Saturday." "I know, but what about when you finish work?" "I don't have any plans." "I don't have one either. Do you want to get together and find something to do?" And that's how Amber and I became a couple. Being a typical naive teenager, I assumed that Amber and I would be together forever, so I was surprised when one evening she said that she wanted to date other guys. "You'll still be my main boyfriend, Bobby. I just want to see someone else sometimes." I looked at her and many thoughts flashed through my head. Finally, I got ready. "I don't own you, Amber, so I can't tell you what you can or can't do. Do you want to date others? You're welcome. Lord knows I won't interfere. Goodbye, Amber." I got up and left. Her dad came over to where I was working the next day and started giving me a bunch of crap for leaving his poor girl alone. I had to get out of bed and go get her. Maybe next time she'll be smart enough to break up with her boyfriend when he brings her home after a date instead of in the middle. This shut him up, and he left the store. Hurt? It almost killed me. The love of my life has turned his back on me. She called me several times over the next 2 days, but I just hung up. Luckily, it happened a week before graduation, and there was so much going on that I didn't have time to focus on the situation. After graduation, I started working full-time in a store. Amber had gone east to spend the summer with relatives, so I didn't have to suffer having her around. I finally looked around and started dating again. I caught Paul in between the guys, and we hooked up for the summer. We both knew it wouldn't go anywhere since she was going east to college, and I was staying home and going to State University. The highlight of the summer for me was, oddly enough, my last date with Pauline before she left for college. It was Saturday and I had to work, so we agreed to meet at Tricorky for dinner and then try to find a couple of parties. I walked into the restaurant and the first person I saw was Amber. She looked at me from behind her menu, smiled and raised her hand to wave at me. I think she was shocked when I ignored her and walked past her to the back booth. Pauline arrived only a few minutes after me, and I saw her nod to Amber as she passed her. She settled down next to me and turned to kiss me, and as I leaned in to do so, I saw Amber watching. I gave Pauline a kiss, and then we picked up the menu and started reading. Twice while we were eating, Amber walked past us into the ladies' room, and I could have sworn it wasn't to pee. She had been away all summer and didn't know about me and Pauline, and I think she had difficulty believing that we were together. We finished dinner and Pauline said she called around and found out that the party was at Marcia Moose's. She called Marcia and found out that they were waiting for us, so we headed there. Marcia's parents were cool and trusted her, so when they went to Vegas for the weekend, they told her she could throw a party. Furniture had been cleared from the living and dining areas to create a dance floor, and the party was in full swing when we arrived. We danced and talked for a couple of hours, and we were on the dance floor when the shouting started. "Find a room, you two." "Find the back seat." Clean it up, guys. This party is rated PG. Paulin said, great idea, stud. Are you ready? Damn right, sexy lady. We turned to leave, and I saw Amber standing off to the side looking at us, and the look on her face was absolutely sad. Paulin was out of town, and I spent the week before classes started taking care of business. I saw Amber at freshman orientation, but I didn't try to talk to her. Since we were both business majors, it was inevitable that we would end up in many of the same classes. We were in close proximity so often that there was no point in trying to avoid her, but even so, all I did was nod in greeting as I passed by. Between my work and school, I didn't have much time to date in the first few weeks, but once things settled down, I started looking. There were a few girls I knew in high school, and some of them, like me, had their sweethearts move away to study elsewhere. I didn't know if their relationship was over until I asked them out. The first person I invited was Beverly Abegg. She agreed to the date, but by the end of the evening, she made it clear that she would always only be a fun couple. Kenny Parks was still her main guy, and he would come over for weekends, holidays, and vacations. If I can live with it, she doesn't mind dating every now and then. Because she was honest with me, I was honest with her. I have a habit of having a sex life, so I will look for a girl who wants it too. If it's not difficult for you, I don't mind continuing to date you. She smiled and extended her hand and said, deal. And we shook hands, and I continued seeing Bev in between my other dates. Nancy Wilde was next, and she said straight out that Jason was gone, and he was history. We dated several times, and on our fifth date, she made love. I'm not easy to get, Bobby, but I'm suffering. Jason and I were doing this 3 or 4 times a week before he left, and I'm climbing the wall. We spent 6 good weeks together, and then she told me she had met a guy she wanted to get to know better. Honestly, Bob, we're just sex buddies. There's no real spark between us. We can still be friends, okay? She was right, so I wished her luck. I started dating Bev again while I searched further. Helen Liss was next. Almost an exact copy of my relationship with Nancy until the very reason the relationship ended, so I went back to Bev. One night I asked Bev what she wanted, and she said, find a bed and have sex. It turned out that she had received a letter from Kenny in which he said that he had found his soulmate and would no longer come home on the weekends. I took her to bed, and for the entire semester and first month of summer vacation, Bev and I were a couple. I was just about to ask her if she wanted to make our relationship permanent when she told me she couldn't see me anymore. Kenny's relationship with his soulmate fell apart, and he came back begging Bev to forgive him and give him another chance, and that stupid fool did it. He ended up cheating on her again, and 3 weeks into our second year, Bev tried to get back with me, but I didn't want to go back there. A week had passed since Bev had tried to return, and I was sitting in the student cafe, drinking coffee and reviewing class notes, when someone sat down across from me. I looked up and saw Amber. Have you calmed down yet? Are you done wasting time on all these other girls? We belong together, Bobby, and you know it. You knew it that night at the football game. We were right for each other, and it was obvious to everyone. Okay, I did something stupid. Are you going to tell me that you've never done anything really stupid and regretted it? I just sat there and looked at her, and finally she said, come on, Bobby, say something. Are you doing anything tonight? No. Then let's spend the evening together. And just like that, we were together again. We made it through graduation without any problems, and a month after graduation, we got married. The next 2 years were wonderful. We were both advancing in our careers. We decided to wait 5 years before having children and actively saved money to buy a house. The only downside was that Amber's job required frequent travel. Not a lot, maybe 3 or 4 days a month, but it was still 3 or 4 days that I would rather spend at home with her. I think I will never forget the date, the 8th of June, 2002. Amber returned from a 2-day business trip and was waiting for me at home when I came home from work. She prepared dinner and opened a bottle of wine on the sideboard to let it breathe. Amber was passionate about wine. She sniffed the cork, let the wine breathe, rolled a drop in the glass, and looked at it to see what she needed to see. I've often joked about it, but not that day. She seemed to have a romantic evening planned, and I didn't want to ruin the mood. She served dinner and poured wine. We didn't usually talk while eating, so the silence didn't bother me. We finished our meal. I filled our glasses with wine and waited. Usually at this moment she would say, "Dessert will be served in the bedroom." But this time she said, "We need to talk, Bobby." "Of course, my love. What about?" "This is hard for me, Bobby, and I tried to find another way, a better way to do this, but I couldn't. I just have to say it straight. I want a divorce." This took me by surprise. I didn't notice any problems in our marriage, but then it dawned on me. "Sorry," I said, standing up and rushing to the toilet. I left the door open so she could hear me tearing. Well, not for real, but I think I portrayed it pretty well. What dawned on me? It must be another man. Since I could account for all of Amber's time, except when she was at work, the man had to be her coworker. I knew two other guys who went through the same thing, and both said they wished they had some evidence to use in court. If they had this, they would be in a better financial position after the divorce. I used my fake trip to the bathroom to retrieve the cassette recorder I was using for notes from my briefcase. I returned to the table and sat down. He took a sip of wine and said, "Sorry about that. It was a shock." "Why? What did I do?" "You didn't do anything, Bobby. It's not you, it's me. I just stopped loving you. That's all. I just stopped loving you." "Who is he?" "It doesn't matter, Bobby." "It matters to me, Amber. We've only been married 2 years, and that's not enough for you to stop loving me without the help of someone. Who is he?" "It doesn't matter to you. Just accept it. Please, just accept that I don't want to be with you anymore and let me go." "I can't do this, Amber. If you're going to break my heart and ruin my life, you should at least tell me why." "It's not because of you, Bobby. It's all because of me." "Who, Amber? Who is he?" "Brian Laddies." "Your new boss? How did this happen? Oh, now I see. You two met on one of your business trips. Did you at least use protection so you didn't bring anything home?" "It wasn't like that, Bobby." "Well, in that case, tell me how it was." "We were having dinner with a client, and Brian was sitting across from me. At some point, our eyes met, and there was a spark between us. After the client left, we sat and talked for hours. We are soul mates, Bobby. We are meant for each other. It's funny, I seem to remember sitting across the table from you a couple of years ago when you said those same words to me. In fact, your exact words were, 'We're meant to be together, and you know it.' You knew it that night at the football game. Do you remember that? Please, Bobby, don't make this any harder than it already is. Is he better in bed than me?" "He's not better, just different, but it's not about sex. It's a matter of our souls, which are in tune with each other." "How many times did you come home to me after that?" "Only a couple of times, Bobby, but again, it's not about the sex." "And how do you see it?" "I have already hired a lawyer, and he is preparing papers for a divorce based on irreconcilable differences, an even division of property, and I am not asking for alimony." At that moment, the doorbell rang and Amber said, "I think this is for you." I went to the door and opened it, seeing a stranger standing there. "Robert Dawson?" he asked. I said yes. He handed me an envelope and said, "You have been handed the documents." I returned to the table and threw the envelope on him, saying, "You're not wasting your time, are you?" It wasn't planned, but the envelope hit Amber's glass, knocking it over and spilling red wine into her lap, possibly ruining one of her favorite dresses. "Oh," I said, heading into the bedroom. I packed a bag with my things for a couple of days and headed out the door. "Where are you going?" "Away from your cheating ass," and walked out the door. I checked into Marriott and left a request for a reminder call at 7 a.m. At 9, I was at the door of the bank when it opened. I needed to see what Amber left me. Amber's lawyer probably wasn't worth what she was paying him because he apparently didn't tell her to do her banking before serving me the paperwork. Imagine my surprise when I saw that all the accounts remained untouched. I quickly changed that. I left $2 in each account, $1 for each year of our marriage. I went to another bank and opened a checking account with half the money, and then went to a third bank and rented a deposit box for the remaining money. I didn't know if they could find out where I had accounts, but I didn't want to take the risk. I didn't think they would think that I would open accounts at two different banks. After all, we weren't talking about millions. It was only about 16,000. The next step was to work, where I told my boss what happened and that I needed a few days to sort out some things. He said to take the rest of the week and referred me to our company's legal department to get a recommendation for a divorce lawyer. Dave from the legal department told me that his brother Chuck was the guy I was looking for and called him to set up an appointment for the same day. The next step was to Radio Shack, where I bought 3 voice-activated voice recorders. I then returned to the apartment, making sure Amber's car was gone, and went inside to pick up the things I had missed the night before. While I was there, I placed 3 voice recorders in places where they could record as much information as possible. I also took the envelope from the table where it was still lying. I read it over cake and coffee at the Village Inn while waiting to see my lawyer. It was just as Amber said, equal division of property, each side kept their cars, and she didn't ask for alimony. My meeting with Dave's brother, Chuck, was enlightening. I learned that we live in a state that has a no-fault divorce policy, but it is one of the few states where you can file a lawsuit for alienation of affections. He also noted that if the company were Amber and Lattice, there is a policy and procedure manual that contains moral standards, and we can sue the company for not following these rules. I gave him a tape recording of a conversation with Amber, and after listening to it, he said that we had enough materials for further action. He then asked me what I wanted to achieve. I smiled and said, destroy, 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 and make them suffer. He said he would take care of it right away. I spent the rest of the day looking for an apartment. I found one not far from work, completed the necessary documents, and moved. I didn't want to take anything out of the apartment, so I visited Goodwill and bought everything I needed to get settled and live. When I left the apartment, I turned off my phone and only turned it on for use, and then turned it off again. There were a few missed messages and voicemails from Amber, but I deleted them without listening. When I returned to work the next week, there were 39, while you were out messages and Maxine, my secretary, begging me to do something to get her off my neck. I picked up the phone and called Amber. Thank you for calling the offices of Harper, Walden, and Associates. How can I connect you? Is this trader already there? I'm sorry. Is my cheating wife still there? The one who sleeps with her boss during trips or long lunches? Oh, there's a short pause then. This is Amber. How can I help you? And doesn't that say a lot? I didn't mention Amber's name even once, but the operator knew who I was talking about as soon as I mentioned cheating with her boss. Why are you calling me? Everything that needed to be said was said after dinner last week. I don't want to talk to you, Amber. In fact, I'd be fine if I never saw you again. Stop trying to contact me. With me, I won't take your calls. I wish you a terrible life, bitch. I couldn't wait to share this post with my lawyer. Yes, by recording. I decided it would be in my best interest to record all my conversations with Amber. Was I curious about what she had to say? Of course there was, just not that curious. The next day, Chuck called me and told me that the documents were ready for delivery and asked how I wanted to organize it. We decided that the documents would be delivered to Amber and Laddie's at work the next day. I countersued for divorce from Amber based on her infidelity and filed a lawsuit against Laddie's for alienation of affections. After they both received the documents in front of as many of her colleagues as possible, the courier will hand the documents to the company representative. Somehow Chuck got hold of a copy of the company's policies and procedures manual, and it actually had moral standards. One of the sections strictly stated that relationships between managers and subordinates were not allowed, So the company also came under attack for not following its own rules, which led to the breakdown of my marriage. The next day when I arrived at work, I told Maxine that Amber would call after 2, which was presentation time. Of course, the call came at 2:10. "What the hell do you want, Amber?" "Why did you do that, Bobby? I thought you loved me." "Loved me, Amber, until you left me for your boss." "It didn't have to be like this, Bobby. I still have feelings for you." "Be serious, Amber, and stop living in fantasies. I don't know what you expected me to do after your little performance, but you should have known me well enough to know that I wouldn't go away quietly. You started this process. So pull up your pants and live with it." "Did you have to go to Laddie's too?" "Of course. That bastard made a move on my wife. He knew you were married, and he did it anyway, so he has to pay. This isn't the 18th century where I could challenge him to a duel and kill him, so I had to go to the 21st century and sue him. Believe me, Amber, I would really like to do something harsher to both of you, but I don't want to go to jail. I've said this before, but it doesn't seem to get through. I don't want to hear your voice anymore. I wish you a terrible life, bitch." I hung up and went back to work. And then events began to develop on their own. The company said the lawsuit against them is baseless, and they have no control over what their employees do outside the office. Chuck played them a recording of my phone conversation with Amber and said, "Your secretary knew how to connect the call without mentioning a name, and you claim you didn't know? Everyone else in the building seems to know, and you want me to believe that none of the executives had any idea." They made an offer, and Chuck said it was probably the best we could get without going to trial where a bad jury could rule against us. Since I didn't really care whether the company paid me or not, I told Chuck to accept their offer. My only goal in filing a lawsuit against the company was to bring Amber and Laddie's to their attention, and in that I was successful. Lattice was fired, but Amber was able to keep her job. Later I found out that she stated that Lattice told her that if she didn't sleep with him, he would fire her. I knew it was nonsense because I had already heard her talk about soulmates. Although Lattice was left without work and without salary, he had significant assets. He owned his home and several investments, but he was still going to fight to the end. No jury will find in your favor in this case. You have no evidence other than the words of a crazy woman. Chuck smiled at him and said, "The words of a crazy woman and your words." Then he played the recordings for Laddie's. "Records? Oh yeah. Remember the 3 voice recorders I placed in the apartment? 2 days after I handed the documents to the happy couple, I returned to the apartment and picked them up. I didn't try to record phone conversations because Amber had a habit of putting her phone on speaker so she could do other things while talking. The first interesting conversation took place in the evening of the day I placed the voice recorders. He is back. No, and I don't think he'll come back. Are you sure he won't create trouble? He'll accept it. My Bobby isn't the one to stay where he's not wanted. That doesn't mean he won't be angry enough to want revenge. Not my Bobby. I know him. He doesn't have an evil bone in his body. He'll do the same thing he did in high school. Ignore me and move on. No spine, huh? I did not say that. Now that he's out of the game, can we hang out more often? Lunch breaks and business trips aren't enough, honey. I need more of you. We can't do this here. He might just decide to come back, and I don't want him to catch us. No problem, honey. We're just leaving work and going to my place. You can get used to the place, since I'm going to move in with you anyway. Now that he's out of the game, we can forget about quick lunchtime meetings and spend quality time together. I like it, but my lawyer said I shouldn't do anything that Bobby could find out and use against me. Why bother? You said it yourself. He'll ignore you and move on. Admit it, honey. He's not a man, he's a wuss. A real man wouldn't get up and leave. He'd scream, threaten to find me. That's why you chose me, honey. You needed a real man in your life. Well, if you think it's okay, I think I can spend the night at your place tomorrow. The second interesting conversation took place in the evening after the documents were presented. You said he'd leave. You said he'd just ignore you and move on. I don't understand this. This is nothing like my Bobby. I thought he was incapable of hurting me. It's too late to worry about that now. Now we need to do damage control. What do you mean? It seems that after we received the documents, the company did too. For what? For failure to comply with rules and procedures. I don't understand. Have you ever read them? No, it sounded like a lot of legal jargon to me. There are moral standards and a whole section about the behavior of managers with subordinates. Beeman wants to see me in his office tomorrow morning, and that could be bad. Why? Because they might decide that my relationship with you is inappropriate, and if they decide to crack down, I might get demoted. This is just stupid. How can a company interfere in the lives of two people who love each other? I laughed out loud at his next words. Are you sure you graduated from college with a degree in business management? Of course. How can you even ask me that? Did you sleep through all your business law classes? There was a lot more, but the point is that Lattice agreed. I had to give him credit. He told Amber to state that he threatened to fire her if she didn't sleep with him on their trips together, and if asked, he wouldn't deny it. This way she could keep her job. When the dust settled and after Chuck took his cut, I still had $89,000 and an ex-wife in my account. Are Amber and I still together? Lattice still? I don't know, and I don't want to know, but I doubt it. 6 months after the divorce, Amber called me. Bobby, I made a big mistake, honey. I miss you. Can we meet and talk about it? No, Amber. How many times do I have to say that I don't want to see you or hear your voice again? And I hung up. So back to her with her brown eyes and flaming red hair. We were at Antonio's, a bar near our work, and every Wednesday night after work, we would go there for a drink to relax and discuss the latest management nonsense. There was a jukebox and a dance floor. Antonio's had live music Thursday through Saturday, and someone was always throwing coins into the machine. The girls I worked with loved to dance, so they were always dragging guys out of their seats and onto the dance floor. I've done my share of dances with them, but I've never been the one to ask. If they asked me, I agreed. Just my weirdness, I guess. Most of them were married, engaged, or had boyfriends, and I didn't ask other women for anything, not even a simple dance. The only exception was Constance. If she asked, I politely refused, saying that I needed to leave because I had to be somewhere else. It was 6:30. We had been there since 5, and the group began to disperse. By 6:45, only Constance and I remained. When we all arrived, we pushed 3 tables together and Constance sat at one end and I sat at the other. When everyone else had left, we looked ridiculous sitting at 3 tables with so much space between us. I could have gotten up and walked to the end of it and joined her, but I didn't. I was afraid it would look like I was trying to hit on her. It's funny, I knew that, but you have to understand, maybe not understand, but understand how much Amber ruined me. What she did affected the way I look at women and how I behave around them. I had just decided to get up and go home when Constance stood up, walked over to me, and sat down next to me. Time for the truth, Bob. There's no one here, so why don't you tell me why you don't love me? Or maybe it's not a matter of sympathy. Maybe you're afraid of me. Come on, Bob, open up. I can be a little weird when it comes to women, but I'm not awkward or tongue-tied around them. Why do you think that I don't love you or I'm afraid? Just the way you avoid me. You don't dance with me even if I ask, and when we pass each other in the hallways at work, you look away. I'm not shy or quiet, Bob. I know how I am. Look, and I'm used to guys hanging around me. I've seen the way you look at me, and I admit I like attention, so when I come across someone who treats me like you do, I have to ask yourself why. The only 2 reasons I could think of were that you don't love me or you're afraid of me for some reason. Well, you're partly right. Fear is part of it. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of myself. Are you afraid of yourself? That doesn't even make sense. Perhaps not for you, but nevertheless, it is true. Come on, Bob, open up. You can't tell me something like that and leave me in the dark. You know I'll go crazy if I don't find out. Well, I wondered what could go wrong. I'm afraid of what I might do if I become friends with you. It doesn't even come close to making sense to me. That's because you don't know the influence you have on me. And I started telling her how I feel about her and why I avoid women who are already taken. She burst out laughing. Would you kill me? Well, I'm pretty mad at my husband right now, but I don't think I'd take you up on your offer to kill for me. The waitress came over and Constance ordered us another drink. As soon as the waitress left, Constance said, "You could be the one I need in my life, Bob. A manly friend whose shoulder I can cry on without fear of him proposing to me." You've missed the point, Mrs. Frederick. My fear is that I might not be able to control myself with you. How about you don't worry about it and let me take control? Now that we've got that out of the way, what are you doing on Friday? Nothing planned, so what? My husband is away in Seattle for 2 weeks training, and I need to go to a charity event. If I go alone, I'll be groomed all evening, so I need a safe escort, and that's you. Whatever you need, what I need is a suit, a tie, and a desire to keep me away from those who want to get into my panties. But I'm one of them. That's why I need to stay away from you. Shut up, Bobby. I get it now. You want to get into my panties, but you won't make a move, and we both know it. The only way you can avoid being my date is to just say you don't want to show up to the public with a freak like me. So tell me, Bobby, what will it be? I took a deep breath, told myself I was being stupid, and said, "What time and where?" When she opened the door to greet me at 6 on a Friday, it took all my self-control not to throw her over my shoulder and run to her bedroom. She was absolutely stunning in her little black dress and 4-inch heels. She literally left me speechless. "The earth is calling Bobby. Come in, Bobby." The sight of her brought me back to reality. Damn it, guy. You sure know how to boost a woman's self-esteem. The charity event was a dinner and dance. Tickets were $100 each, and all proceeds went to various charities. I wasn't particularly surprised to see James Cambridge, president and CEO Cambridge Enterprises and my boss, because it was well known that he supported many charities. What really surprised me was that after dinner and all the speeches were over, when the music started, he came to our table and asked if I would mind if he danced with my date. I looked at Constance, and she nodded that it was okay, so I said, "Not at all. In fact, I think she'd enjoy dancing with someone who doesn't have 2 left feet and doesn't step on her toes." He offered her his hand, and they left. They stayed on the dance floor for 2 songs, and although they didn't dance closely, they talked a lot. He could have been just another horny guy out to get her, but I highly doubted it, especially because his wife was with him at the event. I debated whether to approach his wife and ask her to dance, but then I changed my mind. I was new to these events and didn't know all the rules. I looked around the room full of influential people and realized that I was not up to their level, which led to the next thought. What does a low-level secretary do at such an event? She seemed to know several people there, and none of them required me to stand between them and Constance. And how did she know Mr. Curcy Cambridge? All questions I didn't mean to ask. Mr. Cambridge brought her back to me and thanked me for letting him dance with her. "Dawson, really?" "Yes, sir, Bob Dawson." "No, sirs, please, call me Jim." And he offered me his hand, and I shook it. Constance stood smiling at me as if I had passed some kind of test as Mr. Cambridge left. She took my hand and said, "Now it's our turn, Mr. Two Left Legs." She took me to the dance floor, and then we started dancing. I wasn't a bad dancer, and Constance and I moved well together. She smiled at me, but her gaze was pure devilry, and she pulled me towards her. "You don't want people here to think that my date doesn't have passion for me, do you?" "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked. "Because I can, and it's fun." "Tell me you don't want me." "Go ahead, Bobby. Lie to me. Tell me you don't." I know I've talked about my attitude towards busy women and how I avoid them, but that doesn't mean I'm a coward in front of them, and I've already explained how I feel around Constance. But Constance, I called her Connie once, but she corrected me right away, pushing buttons, and what happens if you push the wrong button? You will turn on something that would be better left off. Constance pressed that button. Yes, I want you, and all you have to say is do it. She tried to push me away and said, "You can't talk to me like that." What's wrong, Connie? You can do it, but you can't take it. I told you I don't like being called Connie. I don't care, Mrs. Frederick. You're Connie to me now. The group announced that they were going to take a short break, and I led us back to our table. When we sat down, Constance said, "What happened to my safe companion? What happened to the Bobby I thought I knew?" Don't act innocent, Mrs. Frederick. You knew what you were doing when you pushed my buttons, so don't be surprised by the reaction. She looked at me for a couple of seconds and then said, "Would you do that? Would you really take me on the dance floor in front of everyone? You didn't say do it, so we'll never know, but I can tell you that at that point, the likelihood would have been very high. I guess I'll have to be careful with my safe companion." She got up to go to the ladies' room, and as I watched her leave, I wondered if I would have had the courage to do it if she had said, "Do it." With anyone else, I would know it wasn't, but with Constance. The band came back and started playing just as Constance came out of the restroom and Jim intercepted her, and they headed to the dance floor. I was watching them dance when I heard a voice say, "Excuse me," and saw Jim's wife standing there. "I think it's only fair that you dance with me since my husband is dancing with your date." I wasn't going to say no to the boss's wife, so I stood up and offered her my hand. As we walked towards the dance floor, she said her name was Stacy, and I introduced myself. We got on the dance floor just as the song was ending, and Stacy said, "We're already here, so we can stay for the next one." The band started the next song, and I took Stacy's hands, and we started moving around the dance floor. "I just wanted to let you know that you don't have to worry about Jim trying to hit on your friend, but I have him on a short leash." Actually, Constance and I are not a couple. She needed someone to accompany her to this event, and she asked me hired. She said she needed someone to stand between her and all the men who would hit on her if she came alone. Yes, I can understand that. However, you two look good together, and, at least from my perspective, she seems to be interested in you. I doubt it. She's married, and I'm only with her because her husband is in Seattle and can't be with her today. She looked at me with an unintelligible expression when the song ended. I led her to her table, and we met Jim returning Constance to our table. We swapped partners, and I returned Constance to her place. As soon as we sat down, Constance wanted to know how I became Stacy's partner. She came up and asked me to dance. She wanted to tell me not to worry because her husband is dancing with you again. What did you answer? I thanked her for making sure I didn't have to worry because I was sitting here at the table, thinking you were going to run away and leave me with a broken heart. She looked under the table, then looked at me again and said, "You're at it again, Bob. Let's go dance." This time there was no pulling me close, and we kept a respectful distance from each other. We danced 2 songs in a row, and then I had to go to the toilet. When I returned to the table, a guy was standing next to Constance and talking to her. Judging by her expression, she was not happy. I came up and said, "Sorry, but you're blocking my space." He ignored me and said to Constance, "How about this?" She didn't say a word, but I did. "I asked you politely to move away from my seat, but that didn't seem to work, so I won't be polite this time. Get out of here, or I'll make a scene by putting you on your butt on the floor." He gave me a dirty look, but still left. "One of the people you wanted me to protect you from." "Exactly, and you did great." Over the course of the evening, I received answers to some of my questions. People came to our table to say hello to Constance. It turned out that she was the secretary-treasurer of one of the charities that would receive funds from the event. And, as mentioned, Jim was a big supporter of charities, which is probably why they knew each other. As the evening drew to a close, I drove Constance home. I walked her to the door, and as I turned to leave, she grabbed me and kissed me. She said, "Thanks, Bob. I had a great time. See you at work on Monday. I hadn't even made it a block from her house before I had to pull over to the side of the road and clean myself up. All weekend, I thought about that Friday night and wished Constance wasn't married. On Monday at work, Constance was in her usual cheerful mood and even joined me at the table in the break room when I took a coffee and donut break at 10 in the morning. We didn't mention our Friday date. We discussed the rumors and gossip that always flew around work. The break ended and we went back to work, and I didn't see her until Wednesday at Antonio's. As usual, 3 tables were pushed together, and I was sitting, sipping my beer, when Constance came in, walked over to me, and sat down next to me. She ordered from the waitress, turned to me and said, "Go throw some money in the jukebox, Bobby. I want to dance." I just looked at her for a couple of seconds, and then I said, "You prefer Constance over Connie, and I prefer Bob over Bobby," and just looked at her. She was silent for a second or two, and then, "Please, Bob, put some money in the jukebox." I stood up, walked over to the machine and put coins in, and when I turned to go back to the table, I found Constance standing behind me. When the music started, she took my hand and led me to the dance floor. As soon as she was in my arms, she said, "I knew you wouldn't ask me, so I decided to take the bull by the horns and ask myself." Why? I already told you. I need a reliable male friend, and you have been chosen. You know what you're doing to me, and it doesn't bother you at all that I'm suffering? You're not suffering, Bob. You're enjoying it, and you know it. The girl you want gives you more than you have any right to expect, and you soak up everything you can get. I think she was right, but I still couldn't understand why she was making me suffer. We stayed on the dance floor for 2 songs in a row and then returned to the table. For the next 15 minutes we sat, drank, and discussed the latest management nonsense. Then a slow song started playing and Gary asked Constance to dance, but she turned him down. "Bob just asked me to do this dance," and she pulled me out of my chair and led me to the dance floor. "What's going on here?" "Gary is one of those guys who wants to sleep with me. There are 2 other guys here tonight who keep trying to get me into the parking lot, so I'm dancing with my trusty man to keep them away." Have you ever thought that your reliable man has his limits, and if they are crossed, he may not be so reliable? Of course I have. I realized it last Friday. I admit, I spent most of my weekend wondering what it would be like to do it on the dance floor. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, me too. We stayed on the dance floor for 1 more song, and then she said she had to go and asked me to walk her to the car. I thought it would be a good time for me to leave too, so I said I would do it. On the way to her car, she asked if I would stop for coffee with her. "I need to talk to someone about a problem I'm facing, and I think you're the one I need to talk to." I was curious, so I agreed. We met at the Village Inn, and after our coffee was served, Constance said, "You already know that I can be straightforward and even a little pushy, so I'll say it right away. I want you to be my boyfriend." I didn't know what I was expecting to hear, but it certainly wasn't this. "What? Did you forget that you're married? You didn't hear a word I said about why I avoid busy women." Just hear me out, Bob. My husband goes away more than he stays home. With business trips, seminars, conferences, and the like, he basically becomes a husband by absence. I need a man when I go somewhere or do something. You saw what happened last Friday, and it happened even though I was with someone. Imagine what would have happened if I had come alone. There are other guys I could ask, but they would do it hoping it would help them get into bed faster. I need someone reliable. It's you, Bob. Everyone saw me leave with you today, so if I hint at work tomorrow that we are lovers, Gary, Ron, Paul, and the rest of the guys will stop hitting on me, afraid that you will take revenge for encroaching on your territory. On Wednesdays, they will not try to drag me out onto the dance floor, to poke at you with your things and try to pester you. At least once or twice a week, I'll have some sort of social event, and I'll need someone to do what you did last Friday. Someone who won't expect me to give in to him at the end of the evening. It's you, Bob. It's a win for you. You'll get to spend time with me, You'll be able to hold me in your arms when we dance, and there will be some public make-out sessions to confirm that we're a couple. Plus, I'll be paying all expenses, and you will meet people at social events, which can help you in your career. How do you like this offer? No, Constance, I don't like it. You already know how I feel about dealing with another woman, and while you may think you can control everything and expect me to behave around you, I'm not sure I can. You're the woman who can make me do what I swore I'd never do. You've already seen how close to the edge I can get when I'm around you. Besides, I have a personal life. Although I don't have a steady girlfriend right now, I date 2 girls regularly, and I have another one with whom I have friendships with benefits. They take up a significant portion of my free time, and I definitely won't cancel a date if I have an agreement, and suddenly I need you for some event. She sat and looked at me in silence for a few seconds, then said, "Okay, how about this? For the guy part, I might start hinting that we had a relationship and I plan to continue it. Maybe from time to time we'll let someone see our closeness, and we will do this a couple of times a week. No one will know that we don't see each other after work or on weekends. Next Wednesday, when we leave the bar, we'll have a fake make-out session in the parking lot, and then the rumors and gossip will do their job. Is that okay?" I thought about it for a moment or two, and then said I thought I could agree to it. For the other part, I usually know 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and I can give you my schedule, and you can plan your dates around it. Please, Bob, I really need your help. Given my attitude towards Constance, it was difficult for me to refuse her, and in the end I agreed to try. Thus began the strangest 3 months of my life at that time. The next day at work, Constance dropped hints to the other girls in the office. I don't know what she told them, but I started getting looks from colleagues that I hadn't gotten before. At lunch, I was sitting in the lounge with Constance, and I noticed that Gary and Ron were giving me dirty looks, and Alice, May, and Belinda were giving me curious looks. Twice during the day, Constance and I had the opportunity to be close, and we both exchanged kisses. On Friday, we repeated what we did on Thursday, and as we were leaving work, Constance said to me in front of several of our colleagues, "I'm really looking forward to spending the weekend with you, love." I spent the weekend with April, my friend with benefits, and she benefited from all the sexual frustration that Constance had accumulated in me over the past week. On Monday, Tuesday, and throughout the day on Wednesday, we repeated what we had done the previous Thursday and Friday. On Wednesday at Antonio's, Constance sat next to me. She danced every dance with me and refused all the other guys. Near the time we usually left, Constance said, "I want to leave now before everyone else starts leaving. I want them to see us kissing when they leave the bar." I walked her to the car, and as I was about to sit in the front seat, she said, "No, baby, in the back. We need to make it look real." We climbed into the back seat, and she leaned back, facing the exit, and told me to stand between her legs. I hesitated, and she said, "Just do it. We both have pants on. Everything we do is fake." I reluctantly did as she asked. She was looking at the door, and suddenly she grabbed my head and pulled it towards her, saying, "Alice and Belinda are coming." I knew this was a bad idea. I have to make you finish what you started, but I think it served its purpose. Those who saw must believe that we are lovers. Now I need to leave and go somewhere where I can solve my problem. We can't just break up and leave. It will look unnatural. Sit down and pretend that button up, and I'll pretend that too. We did as she suggested. Our kisses almost made me want to make love to her again, but I managed to maintain control. When I got out of the car, she asked, "Will you stop for coffee at the Village Inn?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Frederick. You've already ruined my evening enough. It will never happen again." Got it. If that doesn't convince them, that's their problem. She nodded in agreement, and I walked to my car, and drove out of the parking lot. I drove 2 blocks, turned onto a side street, stopped at the curb, and cleaned myself up. We became the talk of the town at work after that night in the parking lot. We continued our performance over the following weeks, but did not repeat what we did in the parking lot. Instead, as we prepared to leave, Constance would say, "I'll see you at your place, love," and I would smile at her and nod. We were affectionate at work and sometimes had dirty dances at Antonio's. I accompanied her to several events and really had to stand between her and those who wanted to hit on her. One of these guys even crossed the line, and I had to use physical force to push him away. I think it sent a message to the others that they shouldn't bother Constance when I'm around. I met several influential people and made contacts that helped me in my work. I also noticed that Jim Cambridge was at almost every event, and he was always talking to Constance. Constance was promoted to assistant office manager, but that didn't change the way we interacted with our colleagues. My time with Constance left me in a near-constant state of sexual frustration, and the only thing that made it bearable was that I had Judy, Gail, two girls I dated periodically, and April to relieve the tension. And then the night came when I began to suspect that I was being deceived. We were at another charity event, and there was a guy who couldn't leave Constance alone. No matter how many times she told him no, or I told him to stop bothering my companion, he kept coming back and asking her to dance. Finally, I got tired of it, and when he came back again, I stood up and stood face to face with him. "Get out of here. I'm tired of you pestering my lady. Leave and don't come back. Otherwise, I'll hit you in the face. Understood?" He looked at me and turned to leave. He never returned, but the mood was soured, and Constance and I decided it was time to leave. We stopped for coffee and discussed a cocktail party she was going to and needed an escort for. The guy from the charity event came in and saw us and came up to our table. He sat down next to Constance without invitation and said to me, "You want to go out and sort it out one-on-one, I'm ready, but don't talk to me about my lady. She's not your lady. She's married and not to you. I think if she can date you, she can too with me." He turned to Constance and said, "I've wanted you for a long time, and I think I have something you'll like." This guy got me. He was an arrogant bastard, and I wanted to stand up and punch him, but I knew that if I did, someone would call the police and I would end up in jail. Lattice. But if I can get it out without making it clear what I'm going to do with it, I might succeed. He was looking at Constance, not me, so he didn't notice my wink at her. Hoping she would support, I said, "I don't know if she's tried it, but I think I'd like to see if she can handle it. We've been talking about the possibility of something. How about it, Connie? Do you want to try it?" "I don't know. Maybe he's just a braggart." The guy laughed and said, "That's easy to prove. Let's go to the parking lot." Constance looked at me and I nodded, so she said, "Let's go." We got up and headed to the parking lot. My goal was to get him to a place where we couldn't be seen and then hit him. Maybe this will teach him that hitting on other people's women is dangerous. Did I think that his technique might be better than mine? No, I was only thinking about kicking his ass. When we went behind a dumpster where we couldn't be seen, the guy said, "How about some proof? Show me something to make me believe you weren't just trying to scam me." I had already clenched my fists and was ready to strike when Constance said, "I can do this," and her hand came out of her purse. The click of the switchblade was almost inaudible, but that was all it took. The guy was already 5 feet away from us and running as if his life depended on getting away from Constance, which to some extent was true. I stood and looked at Constance, and she shrugged and put the knife away. As she did this, I noticed a strap hanging from the end of the knife and recognized it. I bought one for Amber many years ago. It was a can of pepper spray. Yes, indeed, something was wrong, and I was going to find out exactly what. She buttoned up her blouse and said, "It was a memorable date, and it gave me a couple of things to remember the next time you push me over the edge." She came over and kissed me on the cheek. You won't always be there, and a girl needs to be prepared. I took her home, received another kiss on the cheek, and returned to my place. Along the way, another thought occurred to me. After seeing what Constance demonstrated, I began to wonder how Mr. Frederick could leave this treasure at home so often. He can't be that smart, that's all I could think. This led to the next question. Why does a girl like Constance put up with a husband who is away so often? When I got home, I took out the phone book and looked at the F section. There were several Fredericks there, but only one at 1-745 Morningside. The name was Constance Frederick. No Steve Frederick. No Steve and Constance Frederick. Only Constance. The next day was Sunday, and it was a non-working day, Cambridge Enterprises. I had the key to the office and went inside. I headed to HR and knew where Janice hid the keys. I took them out, opened the filing cabinets, and found Constance's folder. I took it and sat down at Janice's desk to look through the contents. MBA from Wharton and works as a secretary? She indicated no in the spouse column. The emergency contacts section contained the bulk of the story. The list of people to contact in case of an emergency included the names James and Stacy Cambridge, and the relationship column listed aunt and uncle. I was deceived. Crap. All of us who worked here were deceived. As I put the folder back into the file cabinet, I wondered what my next step should be. I wasn't too surprised by what I found because I already knew something was wrong. That's why I checked her folder in the first place. No, the biggest surprise for me was Janice. She was one of the biggest gossip and rumor-mongers in the company, but she didn't say a word about Constance. The information told me what Constance was doing. She started as a secretary, then became an assistant office manager, and the next step is office manager. Then she will be transferred to accounting, purchasing, production, and the shipping and receiving department. She was being groomed to take Uncle Jim's place when he retired. She studied the company from the very bottom. The question remained unanswered. Why was she bothering me? Constance could manage just fine on her own. It might be true that if she were with me, most guys would leave her alone, but any guy could fill that role, so why me? In fact, why was anyone needed at all? I was confident that Constance, who I saw during the incident with the mister, who was hitting on her, could handle the harassment on her own and would spread the word that you should stay away from her if she didn't show interest in you. No, Bobby, no, Miss Frederick was playing with me, and the question was why. Why and what to do about it. I spent the rest of Sunday thinking about it, and when I came into work on Monday, I still didn't have a clear plan of action. One thing I knew for sure, I was no longer going to be Constance's set-up guy. Having found out that she was single, I could have gone after her, but I had no intention of doing so. If she had any interest in me, she would have shown it somehow in the last 3 months. Because of my feelings for Constance, I needed to distance myself from her. I enjoyed stopping after work for drinks at Antonio's on Wednesdays with my coworkers, but I was going to stop going there. Constance will be there, and I won't be able to avoid her. At work, this won't be a big problem since she will be in the administration building, and I will be in the offices of the manufacturing plant. I spent most of my workday on Tuesday organizing and setting up my new position. I also called Tom Mix into my office and offered him the position of production manager, which he accepted. On Wednesday, I was busy meeting with the heads of purchasing, quality control, shipping and receiving and production departments. I skipped Wednesday at Antonio's and instead had dinner at Trikakai's and then had a couple of cocktails at the Soft Spot, my favorite sports bar. As usual, I turned off my cell phone while dining out and forgot to turn it back on when I left the restaurant. When I returned home, I found 2 messages on my answering machine. Both were from Constance, and I deleted them without listening. I was surprised why she called her home phone instead of her cell phone. I took it out and saw that it was turned off. I turned it on and saw that I had several messages from Constance, which I also deleted. I watched silent TV and then went to bed. On Thursday at 9, my secretary called me and said there were 3 Mrs. Frederick on the line. I was at work and the call could have been work-related, so I had to answer. "How can I help you, Mrs. Frederick?" I put a lot of emphasis on Mrs. Frederick, but it either didn't get through to Constance or she didn't care because she said, "Where were you last night?" "I had dinner, a drink, and went home. Why do you ask?" "I needed to talk to you about the Humane Society fundraiser on Friday." "Sorry, Mrs. Frederick, But my days of playing fake boyfriend are over. You need to find someone else to accompany you. Now, if you don't mind, I have a lot of work to do and need to get back to business." And I hung up. I thought that my manner of communication was somewhat aggressive towards the woman who would one day become my boss. Of course I did, but I needed to let her know that she couldn't use it against me. I was young enough to start again if necessary, so it was better to push now than later. The day passed quickly, and I was about to leave when Constance walked into my office. "How can I help you, Mrs. Frederick?" "First of all, you can stop acting like a resentful teenager. We need to talk. Here, over cocktails or over dinner and cocktails. Take your pick. I could use a couple of cocktails right now. Meet me at Antonio's in 15 minutes. I nodded in agreement and she left. She was sitting in a booth in the back when I arrived, and I joined her. We ordered drinks from the waitress, and when she left, Constance said, "Okay, Bob, what's going on with you?" Anyone who graduated from Wharton should be smart enough to understand that. Let's pretend I didn't graduate from Wharton, and I'm not smart enough. What's the problem? In short, the problem is that you deliberately played with me. Explain it to me. Why? You know what you did. You knew how I felt about you. You knew and used it against me. You knew that I would never go for a woman who was already taken, and you used it. You knew perfectly well how much it hurts to be around you, knowing that I could never have you. You didn't care about how much pain you would cause me by being around. You only cared that I was a simpleton who could be manipulated. I learned the truth, Miss Frederick, and this didn't make me happy. You don't like my attitude? Well, Miss Frederick, you asked for it. Live with it. Do you want to know why? What's the point of this? I don't know. It's up to you. It all started that night when I joined you at the other end of the table. I liked the look of you and decided I wanted to get to know you better. When you told me why you were avoiding me, I started thinking, is this true or just a sneaky way to get to me? I had a lot of guys courting me, and I learned to recognize those who wanted my money more than me. Of course, this was when I was in school, not here. When I graduated from school and came back here to start my education, I decided it was better to say that I was married to keep guys away. Any guy who came to me knowing this was automatically classified as unfit. This allowed me to look around and find someone I really like. I looked around and saw you constantly looking at me, but did nothing, so I decided to take the first step. You told me your story, and I decided to check if it was true. Whether it is, and this has led to our false attitude. After 3 months of being with me and not making any moves, I realized you were real and started planning how to get you. I was wondering how to get out of the hole I had dug for myself with lies about marriage. When everything went wrong, you somehow figured it out. In a way it was good because I could stop thinking about how to get around the lie about the marriage, but in another way it was bad because you became aggressive. I decided to take a chance and make the first move again. That's why I wanted to sit down and talk. Time to show all the cards, Bobby. I want to exchange the fake guy for the real one, and since you already have experience, I'm offering you a permanent position. What do you say? Do you want to try? I agreed. And now, 15 years later, I'm glad I agreed. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.